Welcome to Métis Minute, your source for Métis news in Region 7. As you've seen in previous episodes, we've brought you stories of Métis events taking place in Alcona. Alcona is a community located in the town of Innisfil. Innisfil is covered by the governing structure of the Barrie South Simcoe Métis Council. Most of us know Innisfil as this sleepy town off the 400 that you pass through to go to Innisfil Beach. But this area is continuing to grow. With development underway, how does this rural town keep its small town charm while being an urban hub for residents and visitors? Well, we bring you The Orbit. The Orbit is the town of Innisfil's vision for a complete, cutting-edge community where small town and rural lifestyles are enhanced by the benefits and attributes of urban living. The Orbit vision has been developed with both the existing and future communities in mind, to ensure that Innisfil grows and continues to be a great place to live. There are 5 goals that are at the heart of the Orbit: 15-minute neighborhoods, achieving a sense of place, high quality density, an insightful city, and a sustainable community. The Orbit was a discussion of the latest Innisfil City Council meeting, which we bring to you today.
Good evening, Mayor Dolan and members of council. Thank you for letting me speak to you today or this evening. I do think that a lot of the work that's been done with the Orbit Secondary Plan is really good. Lots of good stuff done. But I do have a concern about TOC3 lands. And I guess the bottom line for me is that I hope that you can approve the provincial zoning order lands, TOC 1 and 2, but defer TOC 3. One reason is, as I'm going to explain to you, I see that for TC3, the plan is for about 65,000 residents and 15,000 jobs on about 5.2 kilometers, square kilometers. But a lot of that land is reserved for natural heritage space and natural open space and other kinds of open space, so that the buildable area is a lot less than that. It seems to be about 3.2 square kilometers. So putting 65,000 people on 3.2 square kilometers, that's 20,000 people per square kilometer. That is a lot. If you can look at central Alcona, I went to Google Earth, and through their polygon feature, I measured out 3.8 square kilometers of land there, and identified that the population, the residential density is about 2,300 people per square kilometer. Now, the TOC3 lands with the 65,000 is going to be, and if you can visualize this, 9 times the density of that central Alcona area. That's a lot. I did a comparison to to the old city of Toronto, excluding Scarborough, North York, and Etobicoke. It's 3.2 times the density of the old city of Toronto. That's a lot of density. And what's going to happen is that everybody's going to have to be in apartment buildings. I mean, the secondary plan does have a provision for townhouses stacked and back to back and so forth. But that's only going to be few and far between. People are going to be stacked up in row upon row of apartment buildings. And I think that if you're building a livable space, a real community, that needs to change. The balance is way off. Um, and I think I've written to you about that in the past, Mayor Dolan, and I think to Andrea Lee as well. Um, so, 95% of residents are going to be in apartment towers, and they're not going to have personal outside space other than a balcony. Children and pets will not have a secure, parent supervised open space to play in. Sunday barbecues won't be possible. No private garages. They'll all be in basements. And the open space around the apartment buildings is going to be a no man's land, and it doesn't really belong to anybody but everybody in general. So there's really no sense of ownership of those lands, and it'll just be kind of a buffer between buildings, and that really, I mean, you can pretty if you want, but it's not really going to be that practical for day-to-day use of all those people. Um, I think the orbit needs to have much higher densities than what we have in central Alcona, but not that much. Um, it's environmental sustainability is necessary, but that alone doesn't justify that kind of density. 20,000 per square kilometer. That's a lot of density. I have suggested a couple of times that density be cut in half, and that you have a lot more ground-oriented homes with private yards mixed into it, 50-50, something along that. Um, I did do something a while ago with an organization I was with, the Sustainable Urban Development Association, that kind of showed what it was intended to be an example of sustainable high-density greenfield development on the fringe of an urban area. And it came out to about 10,000 residents per square kilometer, which is a lot, but it's livable. It's energy efficient, land efficient, transportation efficient. Overall, about 4.3 times as dense as the central Alcona lands. And if you can visualize what 4.3 times is, the central Alcona lands that I measured was north and south of Venice Beach Road, the distance from railroad tracks to St. John's Road and 25th Side Road. So it's that kind of area. And if you can visualize 4.3 times roughly that kind of density. There is a slide. Maybe it can be shown. If somebody can put that slide up of a partial view of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Yeah, that view is what we came up with. It's just one example, and it's not the be all end all, but it shows you that something different can be done that's more livable, more friendly. It's not complete. It doesn't have some of the apartment buildings that are necessary, and some of the larger acreage of land of open space, and so on and so forth. There's also stormwater management area, and so on and so forth. But even so, that's just an example. Um, uh, it basically shows a very pedestrian-oriented environment, like you're trying to do with the secondary plan. You can see rows of attached homes of various designs, various sizes, and so forth, fronting on what's called a pedway, which is just simply a walkable, sellable corridor. free of automobile, but wide enough for urgent vehicles. Mixed use in that sense, 900 square feet homes, 3,000 square feet homes, all together, plus access to non-residential spaces. If you look at the right-hand side of it, some non-residential services, shops and cafes and so on and so forth. I think what you get in that kind of community is that it's there fosters casual contacts. You get to know your neighbors. Neighbors become friends. Um, uh, there's a better sense of personal ownership and care of the neighborhood and of the environment. If you can see, similar to the new urbanist model, garages in the back, fronting on an alleyway, a little way that takes goes to the main road, to and from the main road. That sort of thing. It's only a partial view, but the 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 provincial zoning order does not really include TOC3 lands. It's really just the 425 meters or TOC1, TOC2 lands. So my request is to you that sure, go ahead and approve the ministry zoning order lands, but hold off on TOC3 lands, please. See what you can do about making it more livable, more down to earth, more neighborly, more ground oriented, with spaces that I think would work better for the community. Yeah, I know staff spent month on this, and I guess maybe a couple of years, but I really don't see the reason why 65,000 is necessary for TOC lands, and that the lands can be better designed, better shaped for a better community. So that is my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stilic, very much. So questions or comments for Mr. Stilic? I'm not seeing any cards, am I? We'll ask you, Mr. Stilic, the same. If you welcome to stay with us with your camera off and muted if you want to listen to the next presentation, which is about the orbit, and then we're going to be debating that later on in the agenda. Or you can watch us on live stream, or you can go about your evening, whatever you would like to do.
Yeah, I'll stick around and watch. My dinner is ready, so I'll bring that along, and I'll just stick with you.
Oh, that smells good. I wish I could have some. Whoops.
Yeah, it is good.
All right, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Richardson and seconded by Councillor Constantine. All those in favor? That is carried. And I think we have one final delegation this evening, and it is David Sajecki, a consultant from Sajecki Planning, and it's regarding the Orbit Secondary Plan. And Mr. Sajecki, I hope I said your name properly.
You did, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Dolan and members of council. As just mentioned, my name is David Sajecki from Sajecki Planning, and we were part of the consultant team along with Weston Williamson and Partners and Hatch, who were developing the Orbit Secondary Plan. I'm very excited to present the secondary plan tonight. By sustainably focusing growth, council and staff have provided direction to develop a plan that protects Innisfil's agricultural and natural heritage and Lake Simcoe. There's a saying in planning circles that some places have no there. That's not the case here. Orbit builds upon a beautiful setting with views of Lake Simcoe, significant woodlands, and heritage buildings and landscapes. In developing the plan, we've tried to build upon and incorporate each of the elements, and we have an opportunity to create a special there. Next slide, please. I think just one up, actually, please. Oh, it's okay. It's not showing up, but it's just the agenda. So tonight, what I'll be speaking to is What is the orbit plan and what does it include? I'll provide a brief overview of where we are in the process, discuss what orbit is trying to achieve, and at a very high level, lay out the elements for how we get there. So next slide, please. And this image identifies the orbit secondary plan area within the context of Innisfil and Lake Simcoe. The secondary plan area itself is the blue area on this image. It's centered around the proposed Innisfil GO station on the Barrie GO line, which is intended to be located near the intersection of 6th Line and the rail corridor. And this new station will provide direct regional access to Barrie, as well as the Greater Toronto Area. Next slide, please. As mentioned, a minister's zoning order was issued on August 6, 2021 for lands within orbit referred to as Transit-Oriented Community 1 and Transit-Oriented Community 2. These lands are centered on the proposed Innisfil GO station. Section 47 of the Planning Act permits the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to issue a ministerial zoning order that regulates the use of land, buildings, and structures. Transit-Oriented Community 1, which is identified on this image by the yellow circle, includes the lands within a 225-meter radius of the intersection of 6th Line and the rail corridor. It permits a minimum density of 200 dwelling units per hectare, minimum building heights of 6 stories, and maximum building heights of 40 stories. Transit-Oriented Community 2 is identified in blue, and it includes the lands within a 225-meter to 425-meter radius from the intersection of 6th Line and the rail corridor. It permits a minimum density of 150 dwelling units per hectare, minimum building heights of 4 stories, and maximum building heights of 15 stories. However, for a portion of Transit-Oriented Community 2 that is along 6th Line, it permits maximum heights up to 25 stories. This ministerial zoning order was issued in advance of the secondary plan, and the secondary plan is required to be consistent with it. It identifies that the ministerial zoning order prevails where secondary plan policies conflict with these area-specific regulations. So next slide, please. This image identifies the secondary plan area in its entirety, so orbit in its entirety. That includes the area that is outlined in red. It is generally bound by 5th Line and Bel Air Beach Road to the south. There's a boundary that is 300 meters west of 20th Side Road to the west. The border to the north is 7th Line in the railway corridor, and to the east, it's a series of existing and proposed communities. Within the eastern portion of the secondary plan area, it includes the Sleeping Lion development, as well as a mostly natural area in the southeast area of the secondary plan, and that's bound by 6th Line, St. John's Road, and Maple Road. You'll notice on this image, the Transit-Oriented Community 1 is identified in sort of a pink color, whereas Transit-Oriented Community 2 is identified in a green color. It also includes a yellow boundary, and that yellow boundary identifies the protected major transit station area that was included in the County of Simcoe's Municipal Comprehensive Review, and more specifically, County Official Plan Amendment number 7. And that also includes within that protected major transit station area, the Sleeping Lion development. You can make out an area that is identified by a hatch. And so that identifies the settlement area that has been, that is being approved through the Municipal Comprehensive Review. That means that to 2051, development can occur within Transit-Oriented Community 1 and 2, as well as a Sleeping Lion development. The remaining lands within this area are called Transit-Oriented Community 3. Those lands will need to be included in the Alcona settlement area prior to any development taking place. The timeline for that is indeterminate, and until that time, these lands will continue to be designated rural, agricultural, and greenlands. So next slide, please. The plan, as I'm sure Council is aware, has been years in the making. Partisans prepared a conceptual design that was approved by council on July 15th, 2020. The secondary plan is very much influenced by Partisans' initial concepts. Based off of those concepts, a series of discussion papers were prepared that covered the themes of achieving a sense of place, 15-minute neighborhoods, higher quality density, sustainable community, and an insightful city. A series of strategic big move strategy and concepts of what we wanted to achieve were developed based off of these discussion papers, as well as based off of a significant amount of consultation. These led to the schedules and policies within the secondary plan, as well as a concept development that is a way to test those policies through a three-dimensional model. And you can see in the box on the right-hand side of this image covers the key policy areas within the secondary plan. And this is essentially the framework for how we get where we want to go. The next slide, please. This is the timeline of the secondary plan itself. So the project started far before with the Partisans concept as well as the ministerial zoning order. But the secondary plan and the Orbit potential innovation plan commenced in March 2022. Between April and August of 2022, there was a series of community engagement events. A preliminary preferred solution was selected, or concept was selected in September 2022, with a series of other consultation events to inform that, occurring during the following winter of 2022. And this plan was further refined and developed into secondary plan policies throughout 2023. So next slide, please. This slide is an image of what Orbit is trying to achieve. It's just a visualization of one way that Orbit can be built out. It's guided, consistent with the Partisans concept, it's guided by the Garden City movement. And so this is to produce relatively economic independent places with short commute times to surrounding areas, as well as protecting the preservation of the countryside. Approximately 50% of the lands within Orbit will be parks, open space, or natural heritage. Green corridors that you can see in this image will connect neighborhoods together, and along these routes, they will be complemented by services, retail, and restaurants. The highest densities will be located near the GO station, and they will transition down in density as you move further out from the 6 line and railway corridor intersection. The plan itself reflects a population of approximately, consistent with the minimum density within the county's municipal comprehensive review, a population of approximately 25,000 people and 5,000 jobs to 2051. That would be all within TOC 1 and TOC 2 and Sleeping Lion. Extending out to 2091, that's the very general timeline for full build out. We'd be looking at approximately a total population of 90,000 people and 20,000 jobs. So a lot of people, but this is to occur over many decades. Next slide, please. A vision for Orbit was adopted by council in 2019. I won't read the full vision statement, but key themes include a community where small town and rural lifestyles coexist with the benefits and attributes of urban living. The public realm, meaning public spaces, are at the forefront of this vision, and the vision for Orbit is to appeal to a variety of lifestyle activities, all season experience, and easy access to the city. Next slide, please. 5 guiding principles were developed to provide direction to the secondary plan. These are focused around sustainability, streets and blocks, land uses in built form, public and private spaces, and mobility. The first principle, sustainability. There are plenty of definitions for sustainability, but the most common is from the United Nations Brundtland Commission in 1987, which defines it as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. There's also a concept called the triple bottom line, which looks at sustainability from the lens of social, environmental, and economic criteria. For Orbit, we've extended this definition to include principles related to sustainable energy practices and digital innovation. At Council's direction, key to the sustainability principles are to protect, improve, or restore elements that contribute to the ecological health of the Lake Simcoe watershed, and to explore alternative energy solutions in district energy systems. Streets and blocks form a community's fabric, and they set the tone for its built environment. As part of Orbit, one of our principles is to develop compact blocks with a focus on public spaces and walkability. Land uses in built form will support diversity, flexibility, connectedness, and resilience. Public and private spaces are meant to promote seamless integration that foster a sense of identity through placemaking and high-quality design. And finally, mobility is centered on the GO station, but mobility throughout Orbit is to support all modes of transportation, including cars, and it will connect together neighborhoods through high-quality infrastructure, cycling and pedestrian paths, and complementary land uses in open space. Next slide, please. This is an image. It's a view from the proposed GO station. It's very much a conceptual rendering, but it illustrates what the public plaza and the buildings near the GO station, the built form of Orbit in the most dense areas could look like. This is again the heart of Orbit. Next slide, please. A series of 4 key directions were prepared to guide the secondary plan. The first is a concentric grid of streets and developments that will orbit out from the GO station in a concentric pattern. However, collectors and arterials still provide a grid pattern and structure for efficient movement throughout Orbit. 15-minute neighborhoods. This is a concept not in any intention related to restricting movement, but it's around ensuring that there are 4 neighborhoods that provide all the services that people need, from neighborhood amenities, commercial amenities, healthcare, schools within walkable neighborhoods. There are 4 that are proposed within Orbit. Each will be a precinct with a distinctive character, parks and placemaking opportunities, but each will be well connected to each other, Innisfil as a whole, Simcoe County, Barrie, and the GTA. The heart of Orbit is the GO station. The proposed GO station transit plaza will serve as that heart, and it will provide a focal point and a hub of activity. Green corridors will serve as a spine, connecting neighborhoods throughout Orbit to the proposed GO station as well as to each other. And this green infrastructure, these green corridors will be framed by a mix of uses with what we call active frontages, so commercial uses, neighborhood uses, community services, as well as arteries with strong public places, strong urban design, and placemaking opportunities. Next slide, please. This image just identifies the 4 precincts or 15-minute neighborhoods within Orbit. The heart of it, there's the station hub in purple, and then there is the northwest precinct in green, the southwest precinct in blue, and the southeast precinct in the orange color. Each of them have their own dedicated priorities and policies and very much their own characters, but they are all connected together. Next slide, please. This is an image throughout the secondary plan. It goes into detail around specific policies for each precincts. As mentioned, they each have their own character, each have their own considerations in terms of transition and height and built form. Primary and secondary nodes that are identified by the blue and the orange circles are areas that are meant to be cultural centers. They're locations for community and commercial facilities, and they've been considered very much in terms of transportation and land uses and connectivity. And they're intended to meet the daily and weekly needs of residents and act as the heart of each of these precincts. Next slide, please. This slide starts to lay out, and I believe Andrea may be speaking to part of this as well too, but the policies that are included within the secondary plan. The secondary plan is based on 5 chapters. So it's an introduction, a vision, goals, and guiding principles, an overview of what development can look like upon implementation of these policies and schedules. And then within the policies and directions that are provided, it focuses on sustainability and resiliency, streets and blocks, land uses in built form, precincts, public realm, housing, including affordable housing, community services and facilities, mobility, parking and loading, cultural heritage, and the required infrastructure, both hard and soft, to support all of this growth. And then the final chapters around implementation and phasing. The next slide, please, identifies the land uses that are permitted that are designated, I should say, within orbit. The area in purple is the major transit station mixed use area. This is the area that will have the highest intensity and diversity of uses. The neighborhood commercial area, which is identified well, it's supposed to be identified in red. It's more of a burgundy color on this image. That is where it permits the commercial uses meant to service the local community and forms those primary and secondary nodes. The residential designations range from high density to low density. And then there are a series of designations for community spaces, employment areas, parks and open space, and natural heritage. A whole series of other schedules have been developed as well that provide direction around the road network, building heights, densities, active transportation, transit, cultural heritage, phasing, and open spaces and natural heritage. And the sort of one of the final slides I have is the next slide, and it speaks to phasing. It identifies to 2031 that there will be an additional 9,400 people that are planned and 1,800 jobs to this time. And this extends out to 2051 with an additional 17,000 people and 3,000 jobs for a total of 25,000 and 5,000 to that time. And then beyond it is when the remainder of the lands, TOC3, but there could be further intensification within TOC1 and 2 as well, would occur. It's very dependent upon a number of capital works that would need to be provided to support this growth. So that includes transit, improved trail, cycling paths, and walking paths, improvements to the road network. The servicing needs to be in place around water and stormwater, and that is being worked through the master servicing plan update, and improvements to the public realm, including the transit plaza, green corridors, and parks and open spaces. Section 16 of the secondary plan speaks to implementation, and it goes through everything from interpretation and phasing to required zoning changes, conveyance of land, landowner agreements, future studies and monitoring. And the next slide is, I'll finish on a visualization, again, of one way that orbit can be built out. Admittedly, it's a big change, but it's a change that will happen over many decades. It's a more sustainable way to grow than much of what we've seen in our region over the past many decades. It's an important move, and this is perhaps a bit of a tongue-in-cheek way to finish. But to paraphrase Stan Lee's Spider-Man, he used to say that with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that can be extended to with great growth comes great responsibility. And I believe this is a great step in that direction. So thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sajecki. Very, very good. Are we going to comments and questions now, or did Director Lee want to comment?
No, Mayor Dolan, I think we can go to questions at this point, and I'll help Mr. Sajecki in terms of responses.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Fowler.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. In the report, there's many references to the projected major station transit area. I can see it near the GO station and the orbit in that sense, but when it extends up to 7th line, what are you looking at in that section of area? It's because it's outlined in yellow. What's the purpose? How would it support the orbit?
So that was actually determined through the municipal comprehensive review. Actually, you know what? Perhaps I'll turn this over to Andrea. That may be a better question for town staff.
Director Lee?
Yes, thank you. So Mr. Sajecki is correct. That was actually identified through the county's MCR, Municipal Comprehensive Review process. as the entire area, which is TOC1, TOC2 lands. It did extend up into an area that was also identified as a development. It is subject to a current draft plan of subdivision. So I did note within the staff report specifically references to there are policies in the provincial policy about protected major transit station areas. And it's promotional policies in terms of encouraging transit-oriented communities and certain permissions that are provided. So the recognition of that area in yellow, as was identified on, I think it was slide 5 in David's presentation, is really to recognize those permissions through the provincial policies.
Follow up, if I may. Okay, in this regard, then, you're stating that it has the potential to be used for transit purposes under OP number 7, I believe it is, but it is not designated to be used currently, as they're looking at extending a subdivision into that area. Am I correct in that understanding?
Perhaps we could, Kevin, go back to, I think it is slide 5, just so I have the map. That one there, thank you. So Deputy Mayor, you can see on that slide, the area that's sort of outlined in yellow is that protected major transit station area. All us planners love short forms. So I did use the short forms in the report as well, but essentially that's the area. So the yellow circular area is obviously those TOC1 and TOC2 lands. But we do see that sort of rectangular shape sort of north of the label Webster Boulevard. And that is the area of what was an existing draft plan, a subdivision that has not been developed, that could then have permissions for increased density, because that's what that protected major transit station area identifies as a higher density transit-oriented community. So because it is focused on the GO line and the GO station, those provincial policies encourage higher density in those areas.
Yeah, if I could perhaps build on that just a little bit further as well too. It's identified within the Planning Act policies around protected major transit station areas. It identifies one of the considerations within them is that appeal rights are limited, and it works its way down through the growth plan, which identifies that for in this case, the ministerial zoning order for transit-oriented community 1 and 2 would supersede it. But within the growth plan, it identifies a minimum density for a protected major transit station area with GO Transit service of 150 people and jobs per hectare.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The reason I'm asking is, and I believe I understand what you're explaining, because we had the circular talk 1, talk 2, and then we had this portion up in the northern section. And I was wondering if that was going to be something like it was going to be a bus station that was going to be for potential future transit use, or is it something that was related to the GO station itself? But it's mostly about density in proximity to the GO station.
Correct. It would not be necessarily for a transit facility, but transit-oriented community development.
Got it. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Constantine.
I just want to know, when are we going to see shovels in the ground?
Who wants to answer that one?
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I'll take that question. Certainly, we're continuing to try and progress with the developer on the GO station design. They are continuing to work with Metrolinx on that. While there are shovels that have been in the ground on their sales office, which they do hope to open later this spring when the weather cooperates to allow them to finish that. This area, we're still trying to work through finalizing the site plans. We're anticipating that'll be later this spring, summertime, and then that would allow work to start after that. So hopefully this year, but I've learned not to make full commitments on that timing at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks very much for that presentation. I think it presents a slightly different view than Mr. Stilich's view of high density and all concrete and no green space. So thanks for that. I do want to ask, my first question is, the secondary plan, realistically, does it have any influence on Talk 1 and Talk 2? And if not, this secondary plan really controls development in Talk 3 after 2051, which means I'll be dead. So just curious, is that what is that a good understanding? Thank you.
Mr. Sajecki or Director Lee?
So I can jump in. So Councillor Waters, essentially the secondary plan and the staff report, and David spoke to it as well tonight. The secondary plan focuses on TOC1, TOC2, and TOC3. So it's the entire red area that we're still seeing on the screen, which is all three areas. What the secondary plan does, though, is recognize the MZO permissions that are in place for the TOC1 and TOC2 lands within those sort of pink and blue areas that you also see on the screen, and recognizes the permissions that are within that minister's zoning order for within the 225 radius, the 250 density, and then within the 425, the 150 density, and those height requirements that David spoke to on the other slide. So those permissions have all been incorporated into the secondary plan. And then the other policies would then apply to the balance of the TOC3 lands in terms of the entire vision orbit vision that we've been looking to achieve, and those fundamental principles that David was talking about, and the directions that we've been trying to achieve that would apply to TOC1, 2, and 3 lands. So that overall vision from the original partisans concept, we're trying to continue to achieve through the entire secondary plan. David did speak to earlier, and it is noted in my staff report, that within section 16, it does indicate that if there is conflict between the MZO permissions and the secondary plan, that the MZO permissions in Talk 1 and 2 would prevail.
So thanks for that, but I'm still a bit confused. What the MZO, I was under the impression, overrides the secondary plan. So can you tell me with some specifics what components of the secondary plan will control the type of development that goes on in Talk 1 and Talk 2?
So Mayor Dolan, through to Councillor Waters, there are still the principles that are within the secondary plan. So the sustainability principles, the innovation, the green spine areas, the transit linkages, the green corridors, those components, through those principles in the secondary plan, we would still be looking to achieve those as long as they don't conflict with the MZO permissions on those density requirements or those height requirements. So it's looking to take those principles that are in the secondary plan and wherever possible, align them in the TOC1 and 2 area to get the vision that council was looking for from as we've continued to evolve. But if there's a conflict with those specific density requirements or height requirements, those MZO permissions apply.
Okay, all right. So we do have some control over Talk 1 and Talk 2 in terms of the secondary plan.
Councillor Waters, if it passes, I guess.
Yes.
And I had some feedback from someone watching on the live stream that if you could put your mic a little bit closer to your mouth, you're a little bit hard to hear. Thank you so much. Other questions and comments on this item? I'm going to ask a question. Could one of you please address Mr. Stilich's comments about the density in Talk 3?
Yes, and it might be helpful. I'm wondering to go to slide 17, where the the phasing population requirements are. And David, I think you did start to speak to this a little bit, where we talked about the short term and medium term, and that 25,000 population being within TOC 1 and TOC 2, and that, you know, post 2051, so that the remaining population, which would be that 65,000 that Mr. Stilic is talking about, the assumption is that that would all be within TOC 3. But, you know, you did speak to it. The intent would be that the highest density is actually in TOC 1, TOC 2, and that, you know, not all of that 65,000 would be solely within TOC 3. There would be intensification within the TOC 1 and TOC 2 lands.
Yeah, that's correct, Director Lee, and I'll add a little bit more to that as well. So the entire 63,000 or 65,000 post 2051 does not need to be accommodated within TOC 3. It could be accommodated within remaining lands within TOC 1 and TOC 2 as well. Within TOC 3, I very much appreciated the work that went into the deputation. I was not entirely clear on the density calculations that were coming up when it was comparing areas of the city of Toronto to orbit. I don't know if it was an apples to apples comparison whereby you were able to just subtract out the approximately 50% of the land that would be there for parks and open space, and that would essentially have those density projections. And when it comes to building heights, the building heights permitted within TOC 3, they range between 6 to 10 stories, 4 to 5 stories, and 2 to 3 stories. So the majority of all permitted heights within TOC 3 are actually within the 4 to 5 story range. So you're looking at very much a mid-rise development with heights in certain areas that would be 2 to 3 stories. So more looking at that, that low density, street related type of housing.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to commend you on the fact that 50%, up to 50% is going to be green space. And when you have this type of high density, you really do need that green space to create those types of communities and and welcoming. So I really want to commend you on that piece, and also the natural heritage piece. So I think those are well represented here, and I think they'll add to a really nice community. Just a quick question: could you talk about inclusionary zoning and what that means?
That's a great question. I'm not sure whether Director Lee, if you'd like me to handle that, or if you would like to address that question.
Yep, if you want to start, that's great.
Happy to do so. So the plan itself directs that inclusionary zoning within and affordable housing within the secondary plan will be subject to higher level policy. To date, that means that development within protected major transit station areas are required to provide inclusionary zoning. My understanding, and perhaps Director Lee, you may be able to shed more insight on that those discussions of exactly how that will roll out is under conversation with the county at this time. But my understanding is that the requirement for inclusionary zoning would be within the protected major transit station area. And we are specifically saying that as policy evolves at the provincial level, the secondary plan will follow suit.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? So I did want to address the comments that were in the report, and all of them were responded to. Thank you for that. And then also, council did receive correspondence from Aaron Verlis yesterday, and also from Boost Fields on February the 15th regarding comments on the draft secondary plan. And as a non-planner, I want to ask, so all throughout the comments from the representatives of Cortel, I keep reading too prescriptive, too prescriptive, too prescriptive. And definitely Xing out all of recommending that we X out all of the digital innovation pieces, that it's not appropriate. But then when I read the other comments, most of them, I think from WTF, from the Williams Treaty First Nation, but maybe I'm wrong. What I got was not enough detail, not enough detail. So explain to me how a secondary plan works, kind of between, like, if we said, yes, Cortel, you're right, all of this stuff is too prescriptive, it shouldn't be in the secondary plan, how do we get it in the end?
So perhaps I will jump in on that one, Mayor Dolan. I think that's the balance. I mean, the secondary plan is intended to be that guiding framework, that overarching policy framework that establishes how development applications going forward, the site-specific development applications, will be considered. And so in putting together the secondary plan and in my review of what David and the team have put together, we believe the policy language that's in there is appropriate for the secondary plan coming forward to council, that it sets that framework of the specifics of what would then be considered in each development application going forward. So there are some very intentional languages in there in terms of digital innovation, sustainability. Again, those are all the fundamentals of the principles and the goals that previous councils and this council have identified that they wanted achieved through this secondary plan. And so we continue to recommend that the plan that is before you today is the one that we are asking council to approve to move forward. And then the details would be implemented through those specific condominium or site plan applications. David, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add.
No, I think you addressed that very well. So it's very much a delicate balance between wanting to have the right level of concrete direction with this secondary plan, but wanting to provide a level of flexibility to applicants as they come forward with applications. The secondary plan very much sets the policies against which development applications will be reviewed. We've been very deliberate in terms of the language where we use shall, which when it says shall, that means that has to be followed, where we've used language like should, and should is more around these are the objectives that we're trying to achieve, and there's more flexibilities associated with that. And we have identified a series of that were outside of the scope of this project, but that would be part of the implementation and phasing of it, such as developing a monitoring plan when it comes to specific items such as the district energy system, which I know will be spoken to, ensuring that development is future-proof to allow for the future implementation of that. But essentially what we're trying to achieve is the right balance to achieve the principles of the plan and future-proofing it for as things change in the future.
Thank you. CEO Gershow.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. Just to add to the comments that have been made and perhaps just to remind council, a secondary plan is ultimately something that is done under the Planning Act. And as much as we seek to plan comprehensively and in a holistic way for the development of any community, including the orbit, there are limits to what any municipality can do under the Planning Act. And, you know, Andrea and David can speak a bit more to that, but I think that puts some legal limitations on the town's ability to require things. I mean, in general, municipalities have to operate within the province's legal framework. And while we can certainly advocate for things that we believe in, when push comes to shove, there are certain things the municipality has legal authority to do and other things it does not have legal authority to do. And ultimately, it's through essentially the courts, so the OLT and so on, where the boundary is really determined when people disagree about where that authority starts and stops. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. There's questions of conflicts. I mean, we try to resolve them. We try to strike a balance of competing interests. If council approves the plan, it is possible, it is appealed, and these sorts of issues will be settled through a tribunal process.
Thank you. And if I understood the report correctly, though, it can't be appealed until the county approves it, and the county can't approve it until OPA 7 is approved. Is that correct?
Correct, Mayor Dolan. Currently, the legislative framework that's in place, and I think council all appreciates that continues to change, but the framework today is that County OPA 7, which designates that major transit station area and that expansion to Alcona, would be required to be approved by the province, and has not been at this point in time.
Thank you. And I did notice also in your report, Director Lee, that there were several comments from the major landholder that were addressed, and policies were made more flexible and changed based on the comments that they made.
Yes, Mayor Dolan. So, I mean, it's been an iterative process. And obviously, as Oliver said, and as David spoke to in the presentation, there has been significant community consultation through this process. We certainly appreciate that, Cortel is the major landholder, specifically in TOC 1 and 2, and then a number of the TOC 3 lands. But at the public meeting, as you saw on the list, we did hear from other developers in those areas. And subsequent to the public meeting, there were other conversations with developers. So we've tried to balance all of those inquiries and requests in terms of the policies that have been brought forward from the consulting team to present to council tonight.
Thank you. One final question for me, and then I'll go to members of council to see if anything else is sparked. But a complete community includes employment land. So is there specific, would be office space? Would that be in employment lands, or is there a specific, would there be office space in this plan?
Sorry, Mayor Dolan, there is office permitted uses throughout the plan. They're certainly permitted within the major transit area designation. They are permitted within a specific, I believe there are 2 types of employment designations, and they are permitted within other areas of the plan as well. Yes.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any comments or questions before we wrap up? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and thank you very much for bringing up the letter from Cortel Group. I was going to leave that alone. But since you brought it up, I'd just like to give you an idea that in a lot of their comments, they basically wanted to gut most of the sustainability issues in the orbit. So they wanted to delete all mention of the digital innovation. They wanted to delete the district heating system. They wanted to delete the green corridors, and they disagreed with the 48% target of green space. They wanted to just encourage renewable energy as opposed to make it a shall. They also wanted to eliminate the basis around net zero carbon emissions, delete the idea of third-party verification around LEED. They wanted to delete inclusionary zoning for affordable homes, and delete all reference to carbon footprint, embodied energy, gray water, and conservation of waste during construction. So, if we I'm glad we're sticking to our guns. Thank you, staff, for doing that, because this would just be a high dense development with no green space, and I think it's a much better development the way you've left the secondary plan. So congratulations on that. We may disagree on the energy piece, but I think the rest of it is well done, and it will make for a very, very different community. And last but not least, we always get caught up on what this development is going to be. The rest of Innisfil remains as farmland and agricultural and rural is what we wanted to have. The only other development might be in Stroud and Alcona North, but most of Innisfil is going to remain the same. So by 2021, our kids will see Innisfil still as a rural community with a really nice urban population close to the lake. So congratulations on that. I know I bothered you a lot around energy piece, but I think we've struck a good balance here. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could perhaps just build off of Mayor Dolan's question, and thank you very much. Appreciate those comments, Councillor Waters. But the specific areas that permit office use within the secondary plan area are major transit station, mixed use area, employment area, and mixed commercial / employment area. Those are the 3 designations.
Thank you so much. I agree with almost all of what Councillor Waters says. I think we stuck to our vision more than we stuck to our guns, and that wasn't just our vision. It was a vision that we all agreed to right from the get-go, but we've also been flexible. So I think that we're finding the right. We have to make sure that this is successful. It can't just be another 4 towers and a GO train station. We can't let that happen, because that will be a fail from what we've said we were going to do for so long. So we have to stick to our word on that.
To learn more about the Orbit development plan for Innisfil, you can visit the City of Innisfil's website at innisfil.ca and explore their building and development section, where you will find all the information you need on the Orbit. Merci for watching, and we'll see you down the river.